Say if they really did happen down here, he really must have been like Superman. For us not to have noticed anything ever.
That was Victoria Hewerman, the Gilgo Ogre's daughter. Since Victoria made that statement, she, unlike her mother Asa, Rex Hewerman's wife, appears to have had a change of heart. Now, officially, Victoria believes he is most likely the Gilgo Beach serial killer, according to a statement from the family lawyer.
She now believes that her father may be the Gilgo Beach killer.
I got nightmares in my head, I fear. Thoughts build up until I can't feel. My mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear.
Victoria Hewerman feels her father may have committed the crimes he's accused of. Hewerman making the bombshell revelation in a new Peacock documentary.
And this is the part that is so insightful, so compelling from that documentary.
Victoria has her feelings and her emotions have evolved.
Her feelings and her emotions have evolved. Her thinking has evolved. Before we get to the rest of this analysis, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. Again, I want to highly recommend you watch the Titan Submersible documentary on Netflix. Really good analysis there, very good investigative reporting, and I am covering that documentary on my channel, so look out for that as well. I'll also be touching on an intertextual element dealing with the psychology that links that case to this case at the end of this episode, so look out for that. If you're finding this analysis worthwhile, interesting, meaningful, helpful, please consider hitting the thanks button, and let's get started. Now, looking at new footage of Victoria, Hewerman's daughter, she does seem to be something of an odd duck, doesn't she? Look at how she's dressed in this clip. Very colorful. We know her father was also an odd duck, and odd ducks are often bullied mercilessly at school. The New York Times actually covered a whole article on this. It is something that was dealt with at one stage in the media. That was his reality. Is anyone talking about that? Do you remember that? Have we forgotten about that?
I want to talk about Hewerman being bullied, though, this new information from his classmates. You know, whenever something like this happens, we always seem to hear that the person was bullied. But I mean, a lot of us were bullied. A lot of people were badly bullied. It just seems weird to always make that connection to me because, you know, most people who are bullied don't turn out to be serial killers.
Well, we know he was bullied even by girls, and we know that it was a lot of bullying. It was an extreme level. And also when he came home, there was a kind of bullying taking place as well. And so what ultimately happened was he struggled to achieve personal agency. You know, we see people bullied at school, but some are bullied a lot more than others to the extent that they become outcasts. And I think that is what happened here. I remember thinking about that when I walked through the school grounds of a school in Massapequa. It wasn't actually the school that he went to, but you can't help wondering what changes an adult forever in these sort of humble corridors. This psychological disability, if you will, forged at school, appears to have been borne out in his years as an adult. Let's listen to the answer from this expert. How does that happen?
It all depends on the way the person is processing what is happening to him or her, how they perceive it, what their own temperament is. And if they're feeling powerless, the way bullying does make you feel, they might be looking for ways to restore their power, to feel better about themselves. So it really is going to be a very personal thing, the way they process what's happening in a.
You may think bullying ends at school, but what if you feel bullied by life? What if you feel you've been given an unfair deal in your life and you want to, and you're processing that in a certain way? What if it's not you, someone else that's processing the way that they are being treated by, I guess, the world? Somewhat surprisingly, the Gilgo Beach serial killer, whatever was haunting him, whatever was ailing him psychologically, seemed to have been soothed somehow at the sort of second half of the arc of his story. Because there was a period of torture and human predation and terrible crimes, and then he stopped. Not many serial killers can or do stop. Did this one because the trail was getting uncomfortably warm, or because his home life had become a cell for what is haunting him? Well, perhaps both. Asa also seems to be a loving wife, even now, despite divorcing him and in spite of him being on trial for 7 murders. Actually, she wasn't in court for the crucial DNA discussion, and that was just yesterday or earlier this week. I mean, it's nice to have someone in your corner no matter what, but this is disturbing.
In the documentary, Huerman's daughter says she believes her dad is most likely the killer.
I can't help wondering whether his own daughter gave him a sense of young women not as sex objects but as people. And although the idea of objectifying women persisted, we have that sense of him on the train, still objectifying women. The positive humanizing impact of his own daughter perhaps overcame many of these dark antisocial impulses. The light overcoming the dark, love healing and soothing pain and trauma. In a sense, it makes sense that Victoria is both ambivalent, because, she's half him and half Asa, but also more sure of who her father really is, because she must know him better than anyone, because, in a sense, she's half him, half human. This must also be an awful cross to bear, to wonder if one carries that same destructive wiring, if you will, to be a danger to one's fellow man. And the answer, of course, is in processing. How do you process what's happened to you? Wiring, of course, is one thing. How others treat you, including parents and peers at an early age, that's another. And then it's also how you respond to that. In my coverage of the Titan submersible, we see how wiring of the sub and psychology go hand in hand. In another kind of catastrophe. Real life seems to let you get away with it, with a certain kind of defective wiring, a certain kind of defective psychology, until a critical inflection point when it doesn't, when there are real consequences to the wiring and real consequences to the psychology, applied by or as a result of that wiring. You need the two together to trigger something truly awful, and of course, it helps to trigger the worst response if one chooses, constantly makes choices to feed these dark, destructive impulses. So if you're doing that, it's quite easy to see, because there's a pattern of making the wrong choices over and over again. It might be from pornography or very negative self-talk or fantasies, destructive fantasies, or even just how one treats animals. Now, between Asa in denial and Victoria's evolving acceptance of the reality that she's in, we see an interesting psychological fork in the road. We see that thinking can be stuck, that you just stick to what you think you knew, no matter what. But we also see that it can and perhaps should evolve. But to be clear, thinking that evolve doesn't necessarily mean it's good thinking. It can evolve down the wrong pathway. Thinking that evolves can lead to someone becoming a serial killer. So thinking can evolve along dark paths. In Victoria's case, thinking can become better and more on track, more in tune with reality. While for others like Asa, it doesn't appear to evolve at all. It remains stuck. And that brings us to the question, and we need to put this on screen, what sort of thinker are you? On track, stuck, evolving the wrong way? And if you did some self-analysis, would you say your thinking about your world is going in any sort of direction? And are you sure it's the right direction? It's evolving, but is it going the right way? Would another you or would your sibling say the same thing? It's just something to be aware of. Asa in denial, living with someone and being unable to see who they are. Not because you perhaps can't see who they are, but because they're successfully hiding their true nature from you, and you're being duped. But then still being unable to see who they are after that covering has been removed, after that person has been exposed, that is a symptom of something wider going on in our world. In true crime, I see that level of denial everywhere. People choose to believe whatever they want to believe, whatever suits them. Even when arguments about evidence are made, they are still believing what they want to believe, using the arguments that they want selectively to support them. Some people do that because they are habitual liars, like Laurie Vallow, and they've built a life on lies, and they just don't have any idea of what reality is at the end of the day. What really concerns me is apparently normal people actually unable to tell the difference between good and evil anymore. The Karen Reed trial, the Idaho 4 case, have become incredibly toxic, and I expect to see more, not less, of this in the future. We are seeing more of this in the present. What I am seeing, I'm sad to say, is that hate and darkness is winning. Injustice is winning. The lies are winning. The people being misled is winning. I also can't help seeing a disturbing analogy in the Titan sub, in this craft descending into darkness, choosing to go down into the darkness. Those on board, especially its captain, as well as those on deck at the surface, all in denial. And then they are destroyed by it. And then they still can't see the wood for the trees. Think about that something as apparently harmless as denial can destroy you, or the denial of someone else in charge can destroy you. This is not someone committing a crime hurting you in a direct way. This is the destruction of your world by someone who's simply in denial. So you better be careful about that. Also, if our psychology is maladaptive to pressure, think about those words. If our psychology is maladaptive, not adapting in the right way to pressure, like the hull of the Titan, even if we aren't in denial, we aren't able to deal with pressure and we break. There's also going to be a catastrophe then. So thinking, psychology, and responses need to not only be flexible and adaptive, but keyed into reality and the real world. And our tool for that, to be keyed into reality, is critical thinking. Thinking for yourself. In other words, we need to remember the science of living in our lives for the rocket to reach its destination safely. Does that make sense? And isn't this an important, really important parable for our times? I'm not going to take it further than that. Thank you for listening. If you found this video really resonated with you, please share it on your social media. You can also join the True Crime Rocket Science community on Patreon. And I'll see you guys next time.